trying surf for the very first time, they go into immediately panic or anxiety attack because they're forced to switch to mouth breathing. The cool thing is that this can be trained. Your nervous system can get more resilient to CO2. The idea of breath hold training is to expose you to so many breath holds that you start pretty much understanding what are the mental triggers that help you get into a relaxed state of mind. 90% of our session is paddling, whether it's like paddling out the back or like repositioning yourself or paddling for the wave. You're paddling the whole time. You're spending more time paddling than surfing. So why are we not like putting enough focus on it?
Do you struggle with your paddle power? Well, I can go months without surfing and roll to pumping waves and surf 3-hour sessions multiple times a day after day after day by using the Basis Paddle Trainer. It was a total game changer for me, and it can be for you too. These things actually work, unlike elastic resistance bands. You can train your paddling anytime, anywhere, so you can catch more waves and have more fun. Just 10 to 20 minutes a couple times a week, and you're gonna be in insane paddle shape, right? So remember, the key progression is more waves, and the key to more waves is more paddle power. Check it out at surfbasis.com. You're gonna be stoked.
All right, welcome to the Basis Surf Podcast. Very excited because today we got Augusto from Underwave Training, who's based in Santa Teresa, and he's a breath apnea coach that specializes in land and water-based breath hold training. If you are concerned about whether you are going to run out of air when you're getting pounded by those waves, Augusto is probably the guy to talk to. So thanks for joining, Augusto.
Big pleasure to be here, Van. Thanks so much.
Cool. Well, let's just dive in. I got a ton of questions. It looks like you do all sorts of interesting underwater drills, but land drills as well. You study big wave surfers, free divers. The whole reason why this conversation started is because I was interviewing RK Training, who's based in Sunset, but he's a big wave surfer. He trains like Aaron Brooks, Rio. And I know that you spent like a month on the North Shore with him, and he was talking about how you guys were like hitting it off, talking about all sorts of funky training. And he was like, you got to interview Augusto. So I was like, all right, let's do it. Yeah. So we got a ton of stuff to get into. I'm actually curious, like what kind of stuff you guys do nerd about. So we'll have to get into that. But first, what I wanted to ask you is just what started you on this journey of helping people with breath holds? Did you have a gnarly experience where you're like, oh, I need to figure this out for myself, or what was it?
That's a great question to start with. So actually it's the opposite. I've been holding my breath since I'm like 3 years old, which sounds funny. Ever since I was a kid, I was like into sports. I would do pretty much everything. Most sports require like a lot of energy, like dynamic energy, basketball, soccer, whatever. And I realized the only place where the rules are different is when you're underwater. Like the way you have to behave, both physically and mentally, when you are holding your breath underwater, it's pretty much completely different to any other sport. And I learned this ever since I'm a kid. Of course, my parents and the other adults were not really happy. I was holding my breath at the bottom of the pool at 3 years old, but they got used to it. And yeah, ever since I'm a kid, I've been holding my breath. There's something so special I discovered of just being down there, trying to find max relaxation, trying to connect with anything mentally that just pretty much makes you go into a sleep mode. And over the years, I discovered surf late in my life. I was not born a surfer. And I started realizing through hearing beginners, intermediate, advanced surfers that they were having these issues when they were being held down by waves or when they were like, oh, caught in the impact zone and stuff like that. And even though I started late in my life surfing, this was never an issue for me because I was like so used to being underwater. I was so used to swimming. I've been swimming my whole life, holding my breath my whole life, not formally like a free diver, but I started like hearing all these pains that surfers have, right? Like all these little limiting factors that pretty much don't allow them to enjoy their sessions, challenge themselves because, oh, it's too big for me, this kind of narrative. And I started realizing I was not experiencing this so much. Of course, I was at a certain extent, but I was like pretty confident about my water skills. And that's what got me into it pretty much. I just started realizing, hey, I have something of value that I could start sharing with people that could help surfers from all levels pretty much feel more confident in the ocean. That's the goal of everything I do, just provide different tools, mental, physical tools for people to just feel safer, stronger, and more confident in the ocean.
Yeah. For those that don't know, RK, he's a big wave surfer. He like surfed Jaws, 60-foot waves at Jaws. Like he lives basically in front of Sunset. So we were talking before that when you spent, I think you spent a month on the North Shore, you guys were like paddling out 15-foot sunset. So scary, proper scary waves. Clearly, if RK is working with you and getting breath hold training tips from you, then there's something about what you're doing, right?
Yeah, that was crazy. Those days in Sunset were crazy. I think that's the biggest I've surfed probably. And RK was like, yeah, let's go. It looks amazing.
He's like, this is just a slightly overhead day. And it's just like quadruple, quintuple overhead, one of those things.
Pretty much. And just a bunch of legends charging. I was like with my impact vest and with my 9.6. I was like, wow, just on the channel, see sitting, just observing, just learning from knowledgeable people, like the way they approach. It's pretty hectic, the way the ocean, the energy moves in there. So yeah, first 2 sessions was just like pretty much observation and getting the smaller, like the middle ones, until you start getting used to it.
So that, yeah, I've spent some time on the North Shore as well. I remember surfing this spot when most of the spots were closed out and it was too big. And it's just something different when you're dealing with that level of energy. And I paddled out in a day with my friends, and there were guys on 9.6s with full impact vests and helmets and stuff. And I was just like on a definitely not the proper equipment. And it was just like, you just see these mountains of water coming in and you're just like, holy moly, like, holy shit. It just activates something so primal and different. And then you just see guys that are just like, oh yeah, this is my backyard. And they're just chilling. They're just chatting about what they ate for lunch the next day, the prior day. And they're just like so acclimated to it.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. And I feel like so much of that comes with just time spent in the ocean. You just get desensitized to that level of risk. But then I'm sure a lot of these guys are also doing proper training for those kinds of waves. I know that RK, when he goes out in Jaws, like he's serious. He has a whole, I'm sure that's what you guys would talk about. So why don't we get into that? What are some of the things that you do and you work with your clients and help people to get ready for bigger waves? And this is in the context, obviously, majority of people aren't surfing 15-foot sunset or 60-foot Jaws. This could be you're a beginner surfer and you're not comfortable surfing head-high waves. It's just as relevant for across all levels, I really think. So yeah, tell us a little bit about your approach to training and some of the stuff you guys do.
Absolutely. First of all, you said something so important that people for a long time, they thought like apnea training was something that only big wave surfers should do. You should only train your breathing. You should only train your breath hold if you're going to charge big waves. And this is one of the biggest myths in surfing. I feel maximizing your breath and maximizing your breath hold capacity, understanding how breath holding works, it's essential for any surfer. What happens most of the times is that people wait until they have a bad experience. They wait until they have a bad experience in the ocean, whether that is a strong set on the head, a very strong, longer hold down, or when they break their leash and they realize, oh, I need to swim back to the shore and I don't feel confident doing in this type of conditions. That's when people realize, oh, I should have done this. Oh, I should have put in more hours into my swimming, into my breathing, into my breath hold. So first of all, it's important to clarify that. I think this is something that should be taught by pretty much everyone that is in the surfing industry at a certain extent, especially for beginners, because right now surfing is booming. You have a lot of people trying surf for their very first time and they're not familiar with the power of the ocean. Something that I've realized in Hawaii is like you were saying, all these guys are probably doing something, but at the same time, they've been exposed to such a strong ocean for their whole lives. So they've become watermen, but we all have access to this. We don't have all this possibility. So the first thing I would do when I start working with someone is assess their breathing patterns, understand a little bit better how they're able to control their breath, if they have some previous experience doing any type of breath training, and then start breaking it down. What is the biggest difference of how you can adjust breathing and breath holding training to make it as specific as possible for surfing? You start with a good foundation of physiology, you start with a good foundation of mental techniques, and as you start breaking it down, then people start realizing how you can apply that specific knowledge coming from different communities, coming from the swimming community, coming from the freediver community, how we as surfers can start applying all knowledge in a practical way. When you're paddling out, when you're resting in between sets, when you're waiting for the wave, when you're like power paddling, when you're done paddling, when you're caught in the impact zone. There's so many gears of your breathing that you can adjust depending on the context. So everything I teach, I always try to make it like super specific to surfing, but first of course, covering the foundations.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that approach, because I see a lot of the concept of the gears, I think is really interesting. We're talking about different breathing patterns for different gears. So how would you like roughly think about breathing across, let's say you're paddling out the back and then you're sitting for a wave and then you like go for a wave and then you eat it. Let's go through that whole thing. What would be like, how should people think about it?
Well, the first question, and this is actually how I start most of my courses. First question that I ask my students is, what do you think is better, breathing through the nose or breathing through your mouth?
Okay, so I think generally speaking, breathing through your nose activates, I think it's the parasympathetic nervous system, so it's going to calm you down. So generally speaking, when you're paddling out, you're not under extreme situations, I would breathe through my nose.
There you go. And when would you switch to the mouth breathing?
When I need a lot of oxygen. So yeah, I think that would be the main one. What's interesting though, because I studied because I was actually getting ready for some heavy waves, and I read a book on freedivers, and then I was like, wait, is this how you should actually, is this the same? I was going to ask you that question. Is it the same? Should you be like pre-oxygenating before you go, like you get ready and all that kind of stuff? But anyway, yeah. So generally speaking though, you breathe through your nose, and then I would imagine leading up, let's say that, oh shoot, okay, this set is about to land on my head. I'm going to try to suck in as much oxygen as possible. And maybe that's when I breathe with my mouth.
Yeah, there you go. So that's the first concept that I introduce people to, which is functional breathing, which basically means not being slave of a fixed breathing pattern, but rather understanding that breathing is something that you should actually change, like the gears of a car. You're not driving always in the same gear, and your breathing should adjust to the context, not otherwise. You shouldn't use always the same breathing pattern because the demands are different. The physiological demands are different. So nose breathing, as we all know, science already proved it so long that it's the most efficient way for humans to breathe. But here it comes, the fact that we are ocean people, we're practicing an ocean sport. And when you're practicing any water-based sport, mouth breathing is going to come way more handy in so many situations. Look at swimmers, look at Michael Phelps, look at free divers, look at big wave surfers, for example, when they're taking their last breath, most likely going to be through their mouth. Like you said, you have more breathing control, you have more breathing volume, you can actually inhale more faster. And also the third one, you can also exhale faster, which comes like the second factor, which is the regulation of oxygen and carbon dioxide in your body. So those two factors pretty much, I think it's super foundational, and people overlook this aspect because people love protocols, people love patterns, right? But it makes much more sense to understand that breathing, you can adjust depending on what's going on, first of all. And the second one is on your levels of carbon dioxide. The more CO2, the more acidity you have in your bloodstream, naturally your body will exhale faster because that's what actually creates the urge to breathe, the carbon dioxide. So the more CO2 you have, the more rapid your breathing is going to become. Now, the problem is that if you're always breathing like this, if you're always hyperventilating, then you also create some dysregulation in your oxygenation. This is where it comes, the mastery of the practice, and something that I always suggest people who are into breath work or any type of breathing exercise, try to include nose breathing exercises as much as mouth breathing exercise, and vice versa. It happened to me like so many times. For example, I've trained people that do a lot of yoga, which yoga, most exercises are done through nasal breathing, which is ideal for most people. And then when they go into the ocean, maybe they're trying surf for the very first time, they go into immediately panic or anxiety attack because they're forced to switch to mouth breathing. But this is so natural. When you're in the ocean, your nostrils are blocked with water. It's very hard to inhale and exhale through the nose. So mouth breathing is the thing that you should do. But because they condition themselves so much to never mouth breathe, then they find themselves in trouble. Yeah. So I think it's pretty cool to start opening the, how would you say, like opening our eyes in terms of there's no such thing as right or wrong breathing. There's only breathing that is functional to a certain context and dysfunctional to another context.
I like that a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
So you see that big set coming. The current at sunset swept you onto the inside, and now you see this 15-footer about to land on your head. So that's when you start mouth breathing. That's when you're like, all right, what do we do? What do we do? Let us know. Yeah. What were you doing when you saw that 15-footer about to land on your head? Besides praying to your mom.
Yeah, that one first. Then the second, that one first, then the second one, okay, control my breath. Again, it depends where I'm at, but let's imagine this situation. I'm not super fatigued. It's not like I've been paddling for hours. Let's just say I turn around for the first wave of the set. I try to make it, but for some reason I pull back, right? And I turn around and I see the second huge wave about to break in my head, right? So I have some time to, let's say I have 6 seconds before the wave breaks in my head. I would first of all try to do 2 or 3 sharp exhalations in order to get rid of some CO2 in my bloodstream, and then proceed to try to time it so I can take a proper last breath from the bottom to the top, diaphragm, intercostals, chest, and then just stay as relaxed as possible. Try to not overmove. Pinch my nose, probably that's something that a lot of surfers, they think it's something kooky to do, pinching your nose. But actually, when you look at free divers, when you look at anyone practicing breath holding, actually a very wise thing to do, because when you pinch your nostrils, you are preventing water coming into your nose. You're preventing exhale, because naturally, if there's water trying to go into your nose, you will exhale. And if you exhale, you're letting go of your oxygen. Second important tip, when you let go of your oxygen, when you let go of air, you're also getting rid of your buoyancy. You're getting rid of your natural flotation. ventilation. So preserve at all cost whatever amount of air you are able to get into your body, protect it as much as you can. So yeah, pinching the nose, great. Just relax, just enjoy the ride, knowing that it's not gonna be too long, which is, we can get into that topic later, which is another myth in surfing, that people feel like wipeouts are like 30, 40, 50 seconds long. At least they feel like that, but surfing wipeouts in nature are so short, and that should bring a relaxing type of mindset, realizing that I'm not gonna be here for too long. So whatever amount of time you're gonna spend down there, you better be as relaxed as possible.
Yeah, I'm sure when you're getting pounded by that 15-foot wave, it doesn't feel like it's going to be a short time. So mentally, or I'm sure you had this discussion with RK, maybe I'd be curious what his protocol is as well. But so mentally, what goes on in your head? How do you relax yourself? Let's say you did all the breathing right and you're feeling good. Mentally, what do you do?
So first thing I do is a body scan. I make sure every single part of my body is as relaxed as possible. And this is something that is practiced a lot in freediving. It's very normal that when we go into a breath hold, especially such a violent breath hold as a big wave could be, we tense up. We start tensing up our shoulders, our face. And this has not only, of course, like you start consuming more oxygen, but any type of physical tension also brings emotional tension. You start feeling more tense mentally. So first thing, that direct your attention into the body. Try to relax your face, relax your shoulders, relax your chin, especially all the facial area has a lot of nerve terminations. So, whenever you're able to truly relax your facial expression, your shoulders, your trapezium, all these areas, you're able to dive into a deeper state of relaxation, even if it's for 5-6 seconds. And then it's a tricky question because it's so personal. And that's something that I think it's always my biggest message when I'm training people in breath holding. People are looking for the secret recipe. They're looking, what do I have to think about to be relaxed? Something that I've learned in the freediving community is that breath holding is a very strong personal journey. And what actually works for me might not work for you. What works for you might not work for RK. The idea of breath hold training is exactly that, to expose you to so many times, so many breath holds, that you start pretty much understanding what are the mental triggers that help you get into a relaxed state of mind. In freediving, we share with people a few techniques, whether that is body scan, some people call it happy place, or trying to get into a joyful sensation or joyful thoughts, thinking about anything that brings pretty much a smile to your face, that makes you relax, just thinking about this one thing. It can be a song, it can be counting, which is not ideal. It's not ideal to count, to focus so much on numbers. We're all different. We're all mentally different. And I feel like breath hold training, freediving training pretty much shows you that. What are your relaxation triggers? What do you have to think about to get yourself into a relaxed state of mind? And eventually you do it so much, you do it so many times in a controlled environment. You just hold your breath so much, static breath hold, dynamic breath hold, deep freediving, whatever you're doing, something more surf specific, you know where to go mentally. So as soon as you go into this different state, which is holding your breath underwater, your mind already knows where to go.
Wow, interesting. That's really interesting that the mental side is so personal, because I've definitely heard other big wave surfers talk about their protocols. Shane Dorian talks about, he'll imagine doing the most boring, mundane thing ever, packing his quiver to go on a hunt.
Yeah.
I was interviewing Ryan Croteau, who's a coach, and he likes to go by the alphabet for some
There you
reason,
go.
because that's instead of numbers. But you're right. I could see somebody doing the alphabet and still just being like, oh, I'm only at D. So I could totally see somebody doing that, and it wouldn't work for them. But for Ryan, it works. Or somebody might be trying to count the number of arrows in their quiver, and then they just, I don't know.
They don't have enough.
Yeah, exactly. It makes a lot of sense, though, because I know that freediving is such this psychological sport. It's almost all psychological with the physical aspect, but intensely psychological. So it makes sense that because it's psychological, then it's going to be very dependent on the psychology of the person. And so different things are going to work. And yeah.
That's pretty much, I've trained with Kay, I've trained with Jamie Mitchell, I've done some trainings with Nick Van Rook, I've done some trainings with Jerome from Morocco. And this is always like the most curious question that you always want, what were you thinking about when you were being held down by that wave, right? And you come to that conclusion that they all have their own personal relaxation triggers. And if whatever you tell me like, oh, this is what works for Shane, then it makes total sense. These are his relaxation cues. But if I try doing the exact same thing, because I heard Shane saying this, then I try doing it. And for me, it's not relaxing at all. Maybe it's even more stressful because I'm thinking about all the things that I'm doing in my day and it feels so long. I don't know. I'm just saying something. This is something that in freediving, it's taught a lot. The importance of starting to see relaxation as a skill, something that you can get better at. It's not just no muscle activation and just like whatever thought comes into your head. It's an active state of relaxation. You're actively looking for for a state of relaxation through constant search. Every breath hold is a different experience. It happens a lot. Like I have people that they're holding their breath for the very first time. Their first breath hold feels horrible. And then I tell them, hey, try to think about something different. Try to do some storytelling, which is what Shane did, just trying to go through very small details of the very mundane things in the day, waking up, preparing the coffee, sensing the smell of the coffee, walking to the beach, stepping into the sun, just trying to break down everything into small details. And I always encourage people to try different techniques. And I've seen people going from 30 seconds breath hold on their very first day, and then by the end of the day, after 2 hours practice, they're nailing 3 minutes. So how can you actually explain that from a physiological point of view? How is it possible that someone who was holding his breath for 30 seconds, now it's able to do 3 minutes? It's all mental. It's all mental. They were able to access a part of their brain where oxygen consumption is minimized because they're not like overthinking too much. They are actively thinking about something, but something that pretty much reduces oxygen consumption pretty much to the same state that when we are sleeping. Their heart rate is super low, pretty much like basal levels. And yeah, they're not stressed out. They're not thinking about, they don't have expectations. They're not thinking about the time of the breath hold. They're not thinking about proving something to anyone. They're just enjoying. They're having a good time in their head, and naturally their body responds to that.
This makes me ask a question though, because in this situation that we're talking about like an optimal situation. You see the wave coming, you're prepared for it. You're not tired from paddling, right? You have the time to prepare. You like, okay, I'm going to take my 3 breaths. I'm going to do a big exhale, a big inhale, and then you do it. And that obviously is going to be very conducive towards a longer breath hold. But let's say that you're wasted from paddling. Like you barely made it out because you had to do a million duck dives, and then you think you're out, and then a giant one lands on your head. You barely have any time to catch your breath, and then boom, you're underwater. Then it's a whole totally different situation. And that's, I guess, what makes surfing.
Yeah.
You're gonna get messed up like that sometimes, but
you're gonna get messed up.
Yeah.
From a physiological point of view, you're going through all these disadvantages, right? Muscular fatigue. Most likely, when you take your last breath, you're not 100%. You're like 60, 70, 80%. Let's say you have a wave like last minute going into your head, or you're like so tired that you're not able to get as much air as you possibly can, right? So you're not going in with full capacity. Your heart rate is pumping. Your muscles are fatigued. And this is pretty much going to cause one thing, that the buildup of carbon dioxide skyrockets. It's going to be like so high that even if you're holding your breath for 4 seconds, you're going to be having the urge to breathe right away. But from a physiological standpoint, you're still dealing with the same physiological discomfort, which is carbon dioxide. Nothing changes, just CO2 built. So here comes the second stage. Like the first stage of the breath hold is always the relaxation. Everything is beautiful, you're relaxed, there's plenty of oxygen, there's not any bit of CO2. As you keep holding your breath, the CO2 starts building more and more. And this is when you get into the discomfort zone. This is when, the breath hold starts getting way more physical because you're having all these respiratory reflexes. The foundation is the same. You need to still find your happy place. You need to still find your calming state, because the worst thing you could do there is give in to the panic, give in to the anxiety, exhale the air, over moving, start like doing 2 or 3 arm strokes but while the wave is pushing you down, all the things that are not going to get you to a better place. So pretty much this is what you hear a lot of big wave surfers saying. Either you relax or you die. It's a little bit extremist, but in a way it is. Panic is never an option. It's the last thing you should do. So protecting a state of calmness as much as possible. And again, exposure. The more you expose yourself to breath holding, the more you will understand how to manage the buildup of CO2, which for people who are listening, it usually manifests with a swallowing sensation. This is the first thing that you get when the CO2 builds up. You start having the need to pass saliva. And the second, you start getting the contractions of the diaphragm. Your diaphragm, our most important breathing muscle, is going to start moving up and down. And this is something we're not controlling. It's a natural response by the buildup of carbon dioxide. The cool thing is that this can be trained. Carbon dioxide tolerance is something trainable. Your nervous system can get more resilient to CO2. What do I mean by this? That, for example, if you're holding your breath for the first time and you get your first diaphragm contraction, which signals CO2 buildup at 1 minute, over time, if you do enough breath hold training and breathing training, you will be able to move that into 1 minute 30, 2 minutes. So your first diaphragm contraction is going to come at 2 minutes. And then if you keep training, it's going to come at 3 minutes. And then if you keep training, it's going to come at 4 minutes. Right now, for you to know how crazy that is, you have professional breath holders holding their breath for more than 10 minutes, 11, 12 minutes, something like that.
Great, yeah.
Their first contraction comes around like 6 minutes. Even actually, some of them manipulate breathing to their favor, so it comes even later at 7 minutes. But still, if you actually think about it, they're holding the breath in a super relaxed state for 6, 7 minutes. And then still, even with the buildup of CO2, they're able to hold their breath for 3 or 4 minutes more. And this is another myth that surfers have. When you start having this sensation or when you get the diaphragm contraction, you're done, right? If you get there, you better breathe the next 5 seconds or you're gonna die. This is not true. This is just CO2, and it's just getting used to like coexisting with carbon dioxide, understanding it's just another phase of breath holding. It's not the end. Actually, we are pretty far away from hypoxia. We're pretty far away from blacking out, which is something that freedivers expose themselves to because their breath holds are super long and demanding. But in surfing, this is not something that we should be concerned about in most scenarios. I'm talking about like 99% of surfers, not the 1% that are surfing maxed out jaws. But yeah, I think it's just progressive exposure, self-awareness, learning how to deal with it. If you've never felt a diaphragm contraction and the first time you feel it is during a wipeout, of course, it's going to feel like you're about to die and it's going to feel like a traumatic experience. But if you've been familiar with this sensation so many times because you've been training it both in static breath hold, dynamic breath hold, surf-specific type of drills, then it's just going to be another day in the office. It's okay, diaphragm contractions, no, chill. Like this doesn't create stress in your mind.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. There's a couple things you said there because you started this podcast saying earlier that you think everybody should train it because the problem is I know a lot of surfers where they just had one bad accident early on in their surf journey and then they're scared of big waves forever. And because of that, just because they had one bad experience and they just have this phobia, this thing that lingers in their back of their mind and it takes them forever. Sometimes they never get over it. And if they did some training beforehand, then yeah, it would just be another day in the office and they feel way more comfortable. And then the other thing is it is all about repeated exposure and that's why you got to train it. It's just like anything, you got to train it. And I practice breath holds and the interesting thing to me is like oddly, it is this kind of meditative experience and it's almost this like pleasurable experience is what it's messed up actually that I say that, but I was the first time I had the diaphragmatic like contractions, I was freaking out obviously, but then I just like relaxed into it and then I was like, I just felt like I was just melding into my heartbeat and it was this oddly pleasurable experience even though I was like, oh my God, I might die. I didn't do it underwater, but I got to a 4-minute breath hold just on land and I was like, I'm ready for Jaws. Definitely not ready for Jaws, but it was a very enlightening experience because then that gave me the confidence. I was like, oh, I could probably hold my breath for just a hold down. But what is interesting about what I see you do is you were talking about different scenarios. A lot of what I see you do is like challenging scenarios. Like you're doing all sorts of these underwater drills. Tell us about these drills that you do underwater.
Yeah, so everything is like a combination between freediving, surf style breath holds, which I'm going to go into that now, and swimming. I do a lot of swimming stuff. I incorporate a lot of ideas and things that I like to innovate from the swimming world. Here's the thing. From the freediving world, most of the times, that you're doing your best breath hold or you're going to try to do something, you're going to do it with full lungs. You're going to try to get 100% lung capacity. Probably the breath hold that you did for minutes, you took a massive breath, bought right, like a diaphragm, intercostals, chest, and then you start holding your breath. You would do pretty much the same for dynamic, right? When you're doing underwater swimming or freestyle front crawl, breath hold, stuff like that, you would do it full lungs, for example, if you are freediving mindset. Now with the surfing mindset, as we were saying before, it's pretty much impossible to simulate or replicate a real surfing scenario because the ocean is just so unique. The energy is so powerful that even if you had 3 guys pushing you underwater, it would still not feel like a sunset wipeout at 15 feet, for example. But you can simulate all the physiological things that are going around, which is what we mentioned, muscular fatigue, empty lungs, breath hold, for example, and having your heart rate up. With those 3, if you combine those 3, that's pretty much the Mount Everest of breath hold training in terms of that. For a surfer, for example, it's so much more valuable to hold his or her breath for 1 minute with no air and with the heartbeat at 120 or 130, for example, than holding his or her breath for 4 minutes with full lungs, with 4 minutes preparation, with it's completely different. So but at the same time, if let's say this is our first class and okay, let's train surf specific, boom, and I make 20 burpees, then you quit. And then you go into a breath hold and let all the air out as much as you can, full empty, and then hold your breath. It's going to be the worst experience of your life. And you're going to be like 5 seconds and you're going to be like, I don't want to come here again. This is too intense. It's very important, as I mentioned before, that there's progressive exposure for the nervous system, our emotional system also to adapt. Because if you cross that barrier where something becomes like so intense, and you don't have the skill set and the mindset to navigate that skillfully, then it's just gonna be like counterproductive. It's not good. It's just too much. Yeah, like this guy, he beat the shit out of me, but I didn't learn anything. I just suffered. So you gotta progress it. You gotta start from the easy, manageable breath holds, and then as you gain more experience, okay, now next breath hold, let's exhale 50% of your lung capacity, which is known as FRC, functional residual capacity. capacity. You exhale. I still have some air in. I don't have full lungs, but I don't have empty lungs. And now let's do static breath holds with FRC. Now you've mastered FRC breath holds in static breath holds. Now let's move to dynamic. Now you've mastered that too. Okay, let's move into raising your heart a little bit. And then you start your breath hold. So you start getting basically more accustomed to holding your breath in all these different scenarios with more or less air, with your heart rate up, with your heart rate down, with muscular fatigue, without muscular fatigue, with short rest, with short resting period in between breath holds. So this is what I do. I just like to experiment a lot with my students, and they're all different levels. So the intensity of the workout changes a lot. I'm never going to train RK the same way I would train a beginner, for example. They have different goals,
Totally.
different intentions.
Yeah.
So,
Well, so I'm curious though. So what is, I don't know if there's, and obviously it'll depend on the skill of the person and the surfer, but is there a rough rule of thumb, like correlation? Okay, so if RK can hold his breath like on land, super chill conditions for, let's say 5 minutes, what does that translate to in water, getting pummeled by 3 dudes spinning upside down? Is there, so people can be like, okay, I can hold my breath for 2 minutes. That probably translates to, I can hold my breath underwater for, in a wipeout scenario for whatever, 10 seconds. Is there any kind of ratio like that you found, or is it just really depend?
it depends so much, man.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell you like specific math, like 50% of your max breath and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It really depends how much you've been exposed to it. For example, when I was with RK, he likes to do a lot of like empty lungs breath holds, of course. And he likes to do that while you're doing air bike, for example. So you're like,
sounds so bad.
You're doing, I don't know, like you're doing a circuit, right? So you're not like also chilling. You're coming from doing crazy jumps, crazy this, crazy that. And then you go to the air. And for a whole minute and 30, you have to do it with empty lungs for as long as you can, right? And if you need to recover, you recover. But if you can nail the minute 30 on empty lungs, then you do it. But you're doing the air bike and your heart is pumping and it feels so strong, right? You need to expose yourself to that to understand where you're at, because it's so different the way carbon dioxide builds up when you're doing so much physical exertion. It's completely different. When you're doing a static breath hold with full lungs, with good preparation, CO2 builds up like so slowly, takes time. But when you're doing like a breath hold like that one, it's just like first 5 seconds, you're already having the urge to breathe. So it's all about strong, very strong CO2 tolerance, very strong CO2 tolerance. Hardcore.
Of course, that is. How does he do that and not end up with just like a massive headache? You know what I'm saying? If you're doing so much CO2 training, wouldn't you get like a crazy headache that would last the rest of the day? What?
That can happen, especially at the beginning, But it's pretty much like when you go to the gym, that for the first time, and try to imagine for the very first time, or like your very first time, is like you're going to have a different type of soreness. It's going to be like, oh, like your body's just going to be like sore like it never was before. And then even if you're training for 5-6 years, you stop for a few months and then you go back to the gym, you're going to be sore, but you're not going to be sore like that. You get used to it.
Yeah, that's really, because it makes me think of one thing in particular, because obviously I'm focused on paddling, and I tried everything to train paddling where I did, because I live an hour from the beach. So I would go to the pool and I would sprint laps in the pool. I would let myself breathe as much as I wanted to, but the sprinting was so intense that I would just end up with massive headache, because I don't have the skill. I'm not like an elite sprint swimmer, so I don't have the technique to breathe. And I would just end up with a massive headache that would last for the rest of the day. And so when I think about RK just doing all that while on empty lungs, it just sounds pure torture to me. That just sounds insane. But I guess he just builds up tolerance to it.
You build it up. Yeah, you build it up. And 1 minute 30 sounds like scary. It sounds scary the same way if I would tell you, hey, let's hold our breath for 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not ready for that. But breath holding is, freediving community is really good at that, at progressive exposure. Even when you're doing deep diving, it's not, okay, let's go to 40 meters. You build it up. You build it up. And even so, like when you're getting to such a depth, then it's like you progress meter by meter. Okay, 40. Okay, tomorrow we do 41. But always within a reach that you're like, I've been here before. I know I can manage it. I know it's a challenge, but I can manage it. So I'm going to just go a little bit further, not so much. That's so important. That mindset is crucial. I feel, again, going back to what I was saying before, just training hard and like suffering in a breath hold train. Breath hold is something that triggers a lot of like survival instincts in ourselves. So you got to be mindful the way you train it, because otherwise you can also create, I don't like that, it's too intense. You need to do it mindfully.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So yeah, it's so true. Progressive overload for pretty much everything is the way to go, right? Whether you're trying to build your aerobic capacity when you're paddling, or you're trying to lift heavier weights, or you're trying to increase your CO2 tolerance, right? Generally, if you spike up way too quickly, you're going to get injured, you're going to get not stoked, you're going to have a bad experience, and it's not going to be good. Yeah, that seems like a really intelligent way to do it. It seems we're talking about all these really gnarly like water training. So are these things people should try by themselves in the pool on their own?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. Free diving. Free diving, by the way, is any form of holding your breath underwater from the moment you are putting your face in the water. Even if you have a small pool in your house, that's technically free diving. That's breath hold in the water. Never has to be done alone. Never. And when alone, I don't mean, okay, I'm going to do it with someone, but it has to be someone that knows the safety protocol in case the worst happen, which is a potential blackout by hypoxia. So yeah, always with supervised professional. And if you're not with a supervised professional, have someone that knows the safety protocol to rescue in case of a blackout. And there's so many options. Like you're not able to do a water-based training. You can do so many things on land, that are going to trigger the same physiological adaptations. Of course, when you have the chance to train in the water, it's so much better to train in the water because you're creating that feeling in the water. But if you're not able to, you don't have supervision, you don't have a safety, just do a land training. Like your body's still going to get the CO2 tolerance, you're going to get the hypoxia tolerance, you're going to get all this resilience that also comes from breath holding. And actually, I was talking with RK once, like for some reason, sometimes holding your breath on dry is harder, especially when you're doing the air bike, for example.
Yeah.
There's something about like for water people, we're used to being in the water. When you're in the water, it's more calming. There's something that triggers in your mind that you go back to the womb. But when you're doing air bike and on dry and there's no water surrounding you, it just feels more intense. You're like, oh shit, I don't want to be here.
Yeah, I've heard it. What is it called? It's called the mammalian dive reflex. Like when your face is in cold water, you can hold your breath for way longer. It's a really interesting thing, right? Originally, we came from the ocean. Like all animals came from the ocean. So there's some kind of like basis in there.
Yeah, you go.
You were the whole reason why I ended up hearing why RK was like saying I had to interview you is because he was talking about, he was like, oh yeah, Augusto came and we were really getting into the breath holds, but you guys were also talking about the importance of paddling as well. What were you guys talking about in that context?
Yeah, I was talking about the importance of paddling and the importance of being not the best, but a good swimmer for surfers. This is something so overlooked, and connecting back to the breathing and breath holding. I've done so many courses in my life for people of all levels, and I've trained people that were coming. I had a panic attack in the ocean. I think I need to train this. I think I need to get better with my breath hold, with my breathing. And then we were doing the theory session, the breathing session. We would jump in the pool. And actually the first drill that I do on my course is not so much of a breath hold. It's more like a breath control with motion. It's called CO2 swimming. You do just like regular freestyle, regular swimming, regular front crawl, but breathing every 4, every 6, every 8, every 10, every 12. So you're like controlling your breath while you're swimming. So that's the first exercise. Yeah. They would jump in the pool, and as soon as they would start swimming, they didn't know how to swim. And I was like, this is the main reason why you don't feel safe in the ocean. It's completely unrelated to the breathing. For sure, it has something to do with the breathing and the breath hold. But when it comes to ocean safety, swimming is king. Being a good swimmer, being a good paddler, understanding the mechanics of swimming is the most fundamental thing every human that is going to try surfing should do. Yes. And this is something that for me was like such a surprise when I started surfing, because I was coming from water, not from the ocean. I was born in city, but I was coming from the water, from a lot of pool. And I assumed immediately that everyone who was in the lineup was by logic a good swimmer. Like if you're out there on a flotation device and you're paddling for waves in the middle of the ocean, you must be an okay swimmer. You must be like okay with a certain extent breath holding. And the more I started surfing, the more I realized not at all. Yeah. Even like pretty intermediate to advanced surfers, as soon as you remove the board from them, as soon as they don't have their flotation device, they're not really good at handling themselves in the ocean. Like in the water, they're not the best swimmers. And man, I see so many issues with this approach, with not making swimming a priority. Even if you're an advanced surfer, it should be something that you're putting hours into every week, especially if you don't have access to the ocean. Being a good swimmer is the key to ocean safety. It's the best investment you can do as a surfer, being a good swimmer and being a good paddler, understanding the mechanics, specifically of front crawl. Because some people tell me, oh, I can go back doing breaststroke, or I can go back on my back. That's not going to save you if you get caught by a current. That's not going to save you if like you're in a sketchy ocean where you need to like push through some certain energy. You're going to have to use front crawl. It's going to be the safest, the most efficient in terms of like efficiency and speed that you can get, the most sustainable over time and distance. And yeah, it's like something that we need to learn as surfers.
It's so interesting. And what's interesting is, so with my paddle trainer, there's also the community where people, and part of what I do is just like surfing, right? People think that they understand the proper technique and they act, but then they film themselves and they realize that they're not using correct technique. And there was a gentleman in my community. He was a former competitive swimmer, been surfing his whole life. And then when he finally recorded himself paddling on the Basis Paddle Trainer, he realized like he was making mistakes. He wasn't applying the proper technique. He wasn't catching the water the way he should have. And it was like a light bulb moment for him where he was like, I'm a competitive surfer. I taught my daughter how to do a high elbow catch, but then I'm actually not doing it. We spotted that in his technique. And it was just like, and then he told me like, oh yeah. And then the next thing I knew, I made it out the back. And my friend was like, I've never seen you make it out the back so quickly. And it was just because of that one shift in the technique. And so it's so true what you're talking about, how that's also just this incredible like safety device as well. Because like when I paddled that big day when it was like everybody was on 9.6s in flotation device, my biggest concern wasn't actually the hold downs, even though it was like, I don't know, it was pretty big. People are on 9.6s wearing helmets. That wasn't my biggest fear. My biggest fear was losing my board.
Yep.
And then getting sucked out and then having to make, because like when it's that big, everything's closing out around that area.
Yeah.
If I went to the right, I'd be at Waimea. If I went down to the left, you could get yourself into a super gnarly situation. So it's like, can you paddle back to shore? That's the question. And if you don't have the proper technique to swim, you're not going to be able to beat that current, and you're just going to be you're going to be going to Tahiti. It's going to be really gnarly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. From a paddling perspective, it's like what we're doing like most of the session anyways. Like 90% of our session is paddling, whether it's like paddling out the back or repositioning yourself or paddling for the wave. You're paddling the whole time. You're spending more time paddling than surfing. So why are we not putting enough focus on it? The second is like something that I was one taught by like a surfer in Puerto Escondido. I don't remember like the context, but he just told me like I was checking out the waves. It was like the first 3 days I was in Puerto Escondido and the waves were like scary. I think it was my first encounter with like big wave surf.
Yeah.
I think I literally arrived from the plane. I went into the beach and I just saw guys leaving the beach with like broken boards, with 10 feet boards. And I just like a massive beach break that was like 15 footers breaking like 100 meters from me. It was like crazy. And I was like, I don't think I'm ready for this. And a guy came to me and like a random guy, I don't remember his station, just came to me. He said, if you're not comfortable swimming there, you shouldn't surf.
Yeah.
And that stuck in my mind. And it's something that I always tell people, if you don't feel confident visualizing yourself swimming there, then you probably shouldn't be out there. And of course, like when the ocean is like massive, then it's different because people have different equipments. They have the jet ski, they have safety. Things are different when we're XXL. But I'm talking about typical conditions that you're like out there and people just going into the lineup and they're like, are you even a good swimmer? If you break your leash, you're okay swimming back. And many of them don't. And throughout my life, I had to do like a lot of rescues here in the beach break of even advanced surfers, even guys that are better surfers than I am. They were like they were gassed out. You would see them like front crawling with that technique. And I was like, man, how is this possible? This guy is like almost doing airs, like ripping, and he's not confident with his swim. And that happens way more often than you would imagine. I feel like in a place like Hawaii, not so much because as I was saying before, they all grew up with this collective consciousness of ocean safety, being a good swimmer. They breath hold, they free dive. There's like massive waves. So if you get into the surfing, you're going to learn the hard way or the easy way, but you're going to learn to become a waterman. But in so many places that, especially now, people are not, maybe they're like in a landlocked country and they go surfing and maybe they're not even good swimmers and they just want to try out surfing for the first time at 30 or 40 years old and they don't have the skill. They don't have this ocean confidence. And wow, it's so important to put time into that.
No, I know somebody that started surfing and did not know how to swim. And she was just like, oh, when I wipe out, I just grab my board. I'm like, what? She was like, yeah. And then she just taught herself how to swim. But I was like, that's pretty gnarly. Yeah. She wasn't going into any big waves or anything like that. So it's totally fine. But it was just like, wow, that's bold. That's very bold of you to like go into the ocean if you do not know how to swim. So crazy. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, no, when I was in Puerto, I was like 3 days watching the waves and I was like, I cannot stay out here. Like I want to have the experience of Puerto Escondido. I'm not feeling confident to go out with the board. So I went to the nearest surf shop and I bought a pair of fins. I feel very comfortable with the fins and swimming. So I just went out there with the GoPro and started like filming the pros, getting barreled in Big Puerto. And that gave me like a lot of confidence to understand the currents and understand the power of the ocean, understand where to be positioned, bad place to be, the good place to be. And after that gave me so much confidence. But yeah, you have to have the swimming confidence first.
I think I take it back. You are a psycho. You are one of the psychos. If you're swimming out there when it's pumping Puerto Escondido, you're definitely legitimately a psycho. Crazy beach break like that. Yep, you're a psycho. All All right. Why don't we work towards finishing up? And just got 3 questions for you. What's your intention when you go for a surf?
My intention, having the most fun, but I'm competitive with myself. I like to progress. I like to be coached. So I like to have fun, but I also like to try to get the most out of the session and try to work on the things that I need to work on. But mostly have fun.
Yeah,
I think that's the main reason. The main reason I changed my whole lifestyle for surfing is because I fell in love with sport and the peace, the fun that it brings to my life. So yeah, every session is a blessing.
Okay. What board would you bring if you were on a desert island with fun waves?
Fun waves, it's like fun.
No, not that kind of fun. Normal person fun. Like head high, double overhead, somewhere around there. A little bit more.
I'm enjoying a lot right now, like the FRK.
Okay.
I'm
nice.
enjoying it a lot. I'm the FRK plus. That's like a combo, but
Want to surf like Kelly? I get it. All right. And what wave would you ride for the rest of your life? You don't have to. No secret spots, but just you could even describe it if it's a secret spot. But I guess you picked Santa Teresa, but that's a pretty fun wave. But
I love the dynamics of beach breaks. So I think the dream wave is like a small puerto.
okay.
5 to 6 feet puerto, 6 to 8 feet puerto. 6 to 8 feet puerto is, I think, is like the dream. I've seen that wave breaking so beautiful, gnarly in a way, but still like makeable gnarly, not like the type of, I don't want to be that guy getting smashed like that. It's like, it can be so beautiful, such a powerful, dynamic beach break. So that could be a dream wave.
That sounds pretty sick, actually. Big enough to keep the riffraff out, but then not so big you're going to die at any moment in time.
Yeah, manageable.
Okay. All right. That's epic. All right, man. This was super fun chatting. Yeah. Thanks for coming on. And where can people find you? How should people look you up? What's your website? All that kind of stuff.
So if you want to look me up, you can find me as Underwave Training. My website is underwavetraining.com. That's where all the info is at. And yeah, thanks so much for having me, man. It was like so much fun.
Awesome. All right, man. Cool.